Have you ever stopped to think about how we actually agree on a price for something? I mean, not in some abstract textbook way, but in the real world. Well, today we're going to dig into that exact question, and we'll do it with this really cool thought experiment that pulls back the curtain on how a market really works.
You know, we've all seen those supply and demand charts in school, but that's not the full story, right? How does one single price actually emerge when you just have a room full of different people, and every single one of them has their own idea of what something is worth? Okay, let's get into it. So, on the left, you've got the classic textbook graph. It's clean, it's smooth, it's elegant, but it doesn't really show you the how. On the right, well, that's reality. A market is just people. And to understand how they land on a price, we need a totally different approach, one that focuses on actual individual people, not just abstract lines on a page.
To do that, we're going to travel back to the 19th century and meet an Austrian economist named Eugen von Baumgartner. Now, instead of getting bogged down in complex math, he liked to use stories, these really clever thought experiments, to explore the step-by-step cause and effect process of how people actually create a price. So here's the scene he sets up. Think of a simple village market. We've got 10 people who want to buy a horse, and we've got 8 people who are willing to sell a horse. And here's the key. Every single person has their own personal price limit, the absolute most they're willing to pay or the absolute least they're willing to accept.
All right, this table lays out all of our players. On the left, you've got the buyers, and they're ranked from the most eager, that's buyer A, willing to go all the way up to $300, on down to the least eager. On the right, you have the sellers, starting with Ba, who take as little as $100. Now pay really close attention to those folks right there in the middle, around that 5th and 6th spot. They're about to become very, very important. So, how does this market actually play out? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The most motivated buyer, A, can easily make a deal with the most motivated seller, Ba. I mean, there's a huge price range there between $100 and $300. Same thing for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th pairs. Now, the 5th buyer, A, is willing to pay up to $220, and the 5th seller, B, will accept $200. So yep, a deal is still possible there. But look what happens next. The 6th buyer, A, if will only go up to $210, but the 6th seller, BF, won't take a penny less than $215. The market slams to a halt right there. No more deals can be made. And that's the key takeaway. In this market, exactly 5 horses will be sold. No more, no less. That 6th trade is simply impossible because the buyer's maximum is lower than the seller's minimum. This is what we call the margin of the market.
So it turns out the final market price isn't set by everybody. It's actually determined by the values of just 4 people, what Baumgartner called the marginal pairs. You've got the last successful buyer and seller, that's A and B, and then you have the first unsuccessful buyer and seller, AF and BF. These 4 people, right on the edge of the action, hold the secret to the price. Now, Baumgartner used these marginal pairs to come up with a general rule for how any price is determined. It was a really brilliant piece of economic thinking that just so happened to have one tiny but pretty crucial mistake in it.
So this was his big conclusion. He argued that the final price range is set by either the successful pair, A and B, or the unsuccessful pair, AF and BF. He figured whichever pair had the smaller gap between their prices would be the one to box in the final market price.
It sounds so neat, doesn't it? A simple, elegant rule to find the price. But here's the danger of relying on just one numerical example. Sometimes, a beautiful generalization can have a hidden flaw. And this one did.
The problem is, his rule isn't universally true. He was just a little bit off when he claimed the price range is always set by either one marginal pair or the other. The real answer is a bit more nuanced, and honestly, it's even more clever.
All right, so let's walk through how to fix this. We can correct his rule with a simple clarification that works every single time. It still uses our 4 key players at the margin, but it combines them in a slightly different way. Okay, first, let's figure out the absolute maximum price anyone could pay, the price ceiling. To find it, you just look at 2 people, the last successful buyer and the first unsuccessful seller. The ceiling is simply the smaller of those 2 numbers. Let's think about why this has to be true. Our last successful buyer, A, is willing to go up to $220. But the first unsuccessful seller, B, would jump into the market if the price hit $215. So if the price went above $215, B would suddenly be willing to sell, and that would create a 6th trade, which we already know can't happen. So the price absolutely has to stay below $215. That's our ceiling.
Now for the price floor.
The logic here is pretty much the reverse. We look at the last successful seller and the first unsuccessful buyer. The floor, then, is the greater of those two numbers.
And again, let's check the logic. The last successful seller, B, would drop out of the market if the price fell below $200. But that first unsuccessful buyer, F, is just waiting on the sidelines, ready to buy if the price drops to his max of $210. So, to keep F out of the market and make sure only 5 trades happen, the price has to stay above $210. That's our floor.
And there it is. When you put it all together, by combining one person from each of the two marginal pairs, we find the true inescapable price range. In Baumbauwerk's horse market, every single trade that happens has to be for a price somewhere between $210 and $215.
So, why do we care about a tiny correction to a thought experiment about horses from the 1800s? Well, because it actually reveals this deep, ongoing debate about the very soul of economics itself.
You see, not everyone loved this approach. George Stigler, a really famous economist from the Chicago School, basically called the whole marginal pairs idea clumsy and misleading. He argued that using indivisible things like horses just made the theory unnecessarily complicated. And this wasn't just a small disagreement, this was a clash of entire worldviews.
This right here gets to the heart of it. For Baumbauwerk and the Austrian school, economics is a story. It's about process, about human action, and it's best understood using words and cause and effect logic. But for Stigler and the neoclassical school, economics is about finding a mathematical equilibrium. It's best described with abstract models, and yep, those smooth curves we saw at the very beginning.
So, this leaves us with a pretty fundamental question. When we're trying to make sense of our world, do we learn more from the clean precision of a formula, or from the messy, unpredictable, and deeply human story of choice? The tale of the marginal pairs is a great reminder that behind every single smooth curve on a graph, there is always a human story.